Get your ears wrapped around the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. All the scoop you need to know from college basketball to the NBA and even March Madness. News of your rising stars. Topics on and off the hardwood. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
Basketball podcast right here on the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Brice. Obviously, today's show, we're going to continue to talk about some updates around the league, about what's happening with the coronavirus. Adam Silver had a sit-down interview with ESPN's Rachel Nichols about some of the plans moving forward, that I'll discuss with you guys. And today, we're also going to do something a little different for the next few shows. Obviously, since this hiatus is probably going to go on for a couple of months from the league, I will go ahead and give a review of each team's season and expectations for next season, what they've accomplished, some issues they may have had, things they need to figure out. I'll give a more in-depth breakdown on all the teams, starting with I'm basically doing kind of divisions. So I believe I'm doing the Southwest Division today, which is in the Eastern Conference, which includes the Hawks, Orlando Magic, Washington Wizards, Charlotte Hornets, and I'm missing somebody. I cannot. Oh, the Miami Heat. Well, actually, that might be 6 teams. So I'm only going to do 5 of those teams today, and then we're just going to go ahead and just do 5 teams. So we're going to talk about all that on the podcast, and I'll break it down for you guys in no particular order. But yeah, we're going to talk about what's happening around the league. Starting off, obviously, I have to give you some of the news. Well, first, a lot of players have been getting tested recently. The 76ers have came out and said 3 of their members have the coronavirus. 2 Lakers players have came. The 2 Lakers, after the Lakers released a statement, they have the coronavirus. Marcus Smart from the Boston Celtics has the coronavirus. And the biggest one, Kevin Durant, has the coronavirus from the Brooklyn Nets. So obviously, as you can tell, this coronavirus impact is affecting people worldwide. Around the league, it's affecting a lot of players. This is one of the reasons why they decided to go ahead and cancel the league, just so this would not continue to spread. And obviously, I feel like every team is basically getting tested at this point to make sure that everybody is good. So that's really the update there. Obviously, I'm sure all these players are in isolation. I've heard that a lot of these teams with people who have the coronavirus, they will sit and work with team physicians or particular health doctors to help monitor them and keep them afloat, treat them a little bit so they can get back to full strength. Marcus Smart released a video today saying that he felt good, he felt fine, and he's ready to go. So clearly, everybody's still in good spirits, as this has been a very challenging time, I would say, in the United States for a lot of people with the coronavirus. So, it's good to see that the players that we watch aren't being as affected by this situation as others. All we can do is just come back and hope for the best and continue to just come out there and play every game and do what they got to do, really, because, we don't know how long we're going to be without the NBA. And so it's important to, appreciate, like I said, what you've had. Hopefully, we obviously, since more tests are getting out there, we're going to get more numbers of people who are getting positive for the virus. Like I said, it's affecting all types of celebrities, from the football world to the basketball world to the celebrity world, the movie world. It's something that obviously we're trying to combat right now in this country, and we just got to continue to go ahead and move forward, really, in my decision making. So I feel like we're in a good spot right now. We're just gonna hope for the best moving forward with this virus as we continue to go ahead and just try to move forward with the coronavirus and dealing with things that we deal with on this podcast, keeping it basketball related. Now, obviously, I told you earlier at the start of the show, Adam Silver had a sit-down interview with Rachel Nichols. He discussed some of the future plans for the season, what he's planning on doing, what he's looking at doing, and et cetera, et cetera. Because obviously, it's important for him to do what he has to do to create a platform that players can safely come back to. Now, a couple of the things that he discussed was, first, potentially having a one-off game for charity. Obviously, just because so many people and so many different companies have been impacted by this game, that sometimes having your best players play in a charity game could, help give back to a lot of people who have been affected by this time. So I could see him going ahead and maybe doing something like that. Obviously, they did it in the All-Star game, and that was successful, and it worked. So maybe he feels like, well, maybe we could do another charity game, but not in terms of it's almost like another All-Star game, I guess. But, I mean, obviously it's still early, so we don't know completely how he'll construct it. But obviously he has a plan for the future. He has a plan moving forward. So, that's one of the things that he has suggested potentially doing. One thing that I think this has been something that he's actually wanted for a while is they talk about the NBA calendar might change permanently. Now, obviously, this has been a big discussion and debate in circles because Adam Silver has been on record saying that he would like to change the schedule, get less games, maybe move the league back, change some dates around. And obviously, with this virus postponing things, this might force them to go ahead and change the league and change when they start. I previously reported a couple weeks ago, the Hawks CEO, he said that he wanted to change the schedule and have it start on Christmas Day where they're more competing with baseball than the NFL. And this might be what breaks the camel's back and gets them to start playing games late. Because let's say they start back in June and you do still do a 7-game series playoff system with all teams. Usually playoffs take almost up to 2 months, so you're not getting done till August. Usually the NBA season starts in October, so you ain't going to give the players 2 months and then say run another 82. So clearly they're going to have to start the season later, and also if you want the playoffs to start around the same time, you're probably going to have to reduce the schedule. Now, we don't know how many games they'll reduce it, but obviously, again, this is still early. This is stuff they're still talking about. This is stuff they're still trying to figure out. But I'm sure a lot of people would like that, and they think that everything should work out. So I think that definitely is something that is going to help moving forward. They're going to have to figure out, okay, when do we do the All-Star game? Because, you don't want to have 1 month of a season and already have All-Star. So where are you going to push that to? Like, it's a lot of things they have to reconsider. Remember, in the next CBA, they were talking about having a mid-season tourney. They were talking about doing different things, having play-in systems. Like, this really could go ahead and make them do it earlier or as soon as expected, because you're kind of placed in a position where this might be what's best. So I'm sure this is something that's going to create a big challenge for him and the Players Association, everybody involved. But, I think it's going to be something that will be interesting to see what happens. I think everybody's going to be very happy about what happens. And they're going to continue to do what they got to do to be successful and get this league back up and going again, but also accommodating for the changes in schedule, accommodating for the players, and getting a schedule that works with everyone around the league so everybody ends up being actually happy about it at the end of the day. So that's really what I'm looking at. So also, you have, obviously he also said that the only way the league can get back going is if the health experts say, okay, I think that's what a lot of people are waiting on in general in the world for a lot of big venues, is the health experts saying, okay, it's okay for y'all to converge in big groups again. Obviously, that's what's making everything close and cancel, because if you can't, obviously, you don't really want to do games with no fans. So that's why, obviously, they may be like, okay, we can start with that. But, obviously, if players keep getting tested positive for the coronavirus, that's not going to necessarily help in that situation, because you don't want to continue to put players at risk to get it from each other. I'm sure if they ever even did that, they would test every single player in the NBA that's on an active roster to make sure, hey, before we start, everybody's clean, because if someone's not clean, they may have to isolate him from the team, so then nobody can get affected by it and everything like that. And also, the NBA are going to look into studying how the effects of isolation and social distancing for players, just to make sure, are their players going to be in a good mindset, in a good spot in their life when coming back from such a trying time. So we're going to have to really see what happens with that. But that's really the update on that front. But now we're going to get into the next segment. We're going to talk about the Atlanta Hawks first, their season in review, what I think about their season, what I think about their future, etc., etc. We're going to do this with every team for the rest of the show, every team the teams that I've chosen for the rest of the show. So if you want to stay tuned, your team is going to be talked about. Maybe not today, but it'll be talked about soon. Stay right here.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment, we talked about the update around the league. Obviously, I'll give you updates to start any show that we do from this point on. On the coronavirus, obviously, we talked about Adam Silver, some of his ideas and changes that he may want to make for the league coming up. We also talked about how many players or different staff members have tested positive for the coronavirus. Obviously, since that is a trying time in a lot of people's eyes going through this virus, everybody trying to stay safe out there with their families and trying to be comfortable and happy and going from there. So, I think that's very important, going through that and making sure everybody's safe at the end of the day as we continue to hear more people continuing to be tested. Obviously, this is going to make, I'm assuming that they're going to go ahead and test everybody in the league because it looks like somebody from every team is getting the virus, and we just got to make sure that everything works out. But so, now we're going to get into my season team in review. And we're going to talk about the Atlanta Hawks. To start off, obviously, if you know my background, I am a Hawks fan, so I may be able to give a little bit more insight, opinion, and maybe some bias on this. But obviously, this is a team I've paid attention to for a long time, since 2007. So I've been a fan for 13 years. So I definitely feel like I can give the right information on what's going on with the Hawks. But so, the Atlanta Hawks obviously came into this year being a team that people thought could make a playoff push. Obviously, seeing how the Hawks ended last year, winning a lot of the games, beating a lot of the better teams in the league, Trae Young going off. Everybody thought, wow, this team, if they make a couple adjustments this offseason, they'll be right in the playoff hunt, because this is the Eastern Conference. You're not really having to have a winning record to get in. You could have a losing record and still get in. Think about it. Teams right now are like 6-7 games under 500, and they're in the 8th spot. So you would think, the Hawks could do that. They could do that, right? Well, it didn't turn out that way. After starting the season 3-1, the suspension to John Collins is really what messed everything up. And then Trae Young has been out a couple of games here and there with ankle injuries. And then Kevin Huerter, he's been hurt all preseason, came back slow, trying to get back in the thing. The rookies, Cam Reddish was not looking like what he was looking like before this season was put on pause. I mean, literally a lot of things were just not going the way the Hawks expected it to go to start the season. And it created a lot of disappointment. There were rumors Trae Young was not happy. He was emotional in the locker room. He was hoping that they could win. He was hoping that they could do better. Obviously, there was rumors that Lloyd Pierce could potentially be up to get fired if the team doesn't start to play better. And this is his second year as the coach. So it feels like there definitely has been some issues. Obviously, the Hawks months before the hiatus, played better at the end of the year, which is kind of like they did last year, where after the All-Star break, they played better. So clearly they're getting better, but they're getting better at the wrong time. I know Trey talked about if I never got hurt and Kevin wasn't starting off slow and John never had 25 games, what would we have been? I mean, honestly, they all they had to do was maybe win like 8 more games and then they'd be right in the playoff hunt. Could have John Collins not missing those 25 games really, could he have gave them 8 more wins? Because if you look at the way this Hawks team is constructed, at the beginning of the season especially, it wasn't a team that if Trey didn't have a good game and John didn't have a good game and Kevin didn't have a good game, they could win a lot of those games. Because they are very systematically, offensively reliant on Trey Young. See, what happened when John went down and Kevin Huerter was having issues, only people who were scoring was Trey and Jabari on a consistent basis. Jabari was actually having a great start to the season. But that was really all the reliable scoring they had, which is why they lost. Plus, also, the Hawks are a very atrocious defensive team, especially in the post. Trey Young obviously is the liability defensively. John Collins' strength is not defense. He's a very weak post defender. Obviously, the centers they had were very average in terms of defending, so they really never had a great defensive unit on the floor, which was one of their biggest issues. And then also, unless Trey was going off and Jabari was going off, they really didn't have much chance in a lot of these games to compete and win. So, obviously, the trade deadline came. They traded for Clint Capella and Dwayne Dedmon, who are both known as defensive centers. Obviously, Dwayne is more of a defensive guy, 7-footer, can stretch the floor. Clint is more of in the paint, athletic, alley hoops, can jump and defend. So they got 2 defensive centers, which was their biggest hole of the team. Kevin Huerter started to play better, getting his, obviously being able to play now, getting his feet under him. John Collins, I mean, this man's averaging, I think in the month of February, he averaged 25 points and 10 rebounds. John Collins is short. He has showed he can score because he can stretch the floor, hit the 3, he can get to the paint, he can hit the mid-range. He's athletic. He has great hops. He can get alley-oops. And then Trey has been Trey all year. He's averaging almost 30 and 9 a game. So you see all the potential in the world for the Atlanta Hawks to be a better team. But then here's the thing. Cam Reddish started to play better. Cam Reddish started to have 20-point games, hitting 6 of 8 from 3. Cam Reddish, if you look at the way he played at the beginning of the season and now, he played very out of control. He played very wild. It seemed like he was not ready for the NBA at that moment. And people were wondering, why is he getting playtime if he's struggling like this? Or after the All-Star break, he finally, he kind of got himself down. He showed the talent that we all thought he had. And DeAndre Hunter hasn't been bad either. DeAndre Hunter was never looked at as a guy who was going to come in here and average 20 a game. If you could get 10 to 15 from DeAndre Hunter, he's going to be a 3-and-D guy in this game. His strength was defense. Remember, coming out of the draft, they said he was probably going to be, at the time too, was one of the best defensive players, if not the best defensive player in that draft. That was his strength. Now, obviously, he wasn't going to be the best defensive player out of the draft in general, just because Cam Reddish, as you can see, he could be a lockdown defender, especially since he has those physical skills to be a shutdown defender. DeAndre Hunter is more of a guy who's just going to be a solid role player, a solid 3-and-D guy, play defense, could have a big game shooting, but if not, he can get you between 10 and 15 a game. And if you look at that, and you got Dwayne and Clint, you feel like the Hawks should be a team, especially if they keep this roster next year, that should be in a better place. Now, obviously, there were also rumors about some trades over the season. They were talking about early, the Hawks may not want to keep John Collins because he is a defensive liability, and they don't want to commit $20 million a year to a guy. They can't play good defense. So I'm sure if I'm John Collins during this break, I would try to work on my defense. I would try to be a better defender and make them feel like, hey, because I think a lot of people like John Collins, especially if you're a Hawks fan. You know the talent John Collins possesses. They call him Baptist John because he went to Wake Forest. So, and they see the talent. Because, the thing is like, okay, who else do you have averaging 20 a game for you outside of Trey Young on this team? Nobody. Cam can maybe be a better scorer next year. Maybe DeAndre, maybe Kevin. But are you really going to sit here and take away a guy can give you about 20 with Trey every night if Trey get 30, he get 20, you're going to have 50 between two players. And then you still got Kevin Huerter and Cam Reddish having to score too. Because if you do that, we're going to have to figure out who's going to be that second scorer is for the Atlanta Hawks. And I don't know if you want to put yourself in that position. I think he has a year left before his contract is up. So next year will be when his contract's up. So obviously that'll be a big talking point in the city of Atlanta to see what happens. We know Trey's going to get the max. He's going to get the max deal. I mean, we'll have to see what happens. We also got to see what maybe free agent additions they make over the offseason. I'm sure they're going to... They have some guys. I think obviously their bench probably needs to be upgraded a little bit, especially on the back end. I feel like if they can maybe get an upgraded backup point, even though I like Brandon Goodwin, he's fine. I would not be mad about him going into the season like he's a liability. Just if you can, you should look into it. A backup shooting guard, because I feel like either Cam or DeAndre have to come off the bench. So unless you're going to go to a small ball lineup, which you're not going to do, obviously. So obviously there's some things you can do here. There's some decisions that can be made, and there's some changes that can be made that can put the team in better position moving forward, going into the offseason and potentially trying to get the Hawks to win next year for the first time in a few years. And, like I said, the city has a very exciting player in Trey Young that everybody wants to come see. And now they just got to start winning and putting it together, and the Hawks can be one of the hottest tickets in all of the NBA. But coming up next, we talked about the Atlanta Hawks this past segment. Now we're going to talk about the Boston Celtics next segment, their season review, right here on the GSMC Basketball Podcast.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment, we talked about the Atlanta Hawks season in review. I broke down to you what the season started like, what the story of the Hawks season has been, expectations that weren't reached, but still potential and confidence going into the future with the young pieces that they have on the roster. I also broke down, why they could be a team to be reckoned with next year and why they could potentially be one of the hottest tickets to get in the NBA in years to come if everything starts to mesh together and they figure out what they're going to do with their team moving forward. Obviously, they made the trade for Clint Capella. We haven't seen him play in a Hawks uniform yet, so I'm sure everybody wants to see how that's going to look. But the Hawks have plenty of potential moving forward. It's just about getting everything to work out, good coaching, and just and starting out the season on a better note than they have the last 2 years. And because they play well at the end, but they don't play at the beginning. And with the young pieces they have, they should be better. Plus, they'll probably get another lottery pick this offseason as well. But now, we're going to go ahead and get into the Boston Celtics season. Obviously, Boston currently is in the playoff race, currently a third seed in the playoffs. If the season started today, whenever they resume the season, if they don't cancel the season, the playoffs, Boston Celtics will be in it. So they still have some season to go. But now I'm going to break down to you what's their season been like. Obviously, we know what happened last year with Boston. We know what happened with Kyrie Irving. And the issues that the Boston Celtics seem to have playing together with Kyrie Irving on the floor. Obviously, a lot of people talking about and questioning Kyrie Irving as a leader, saying that he messed up the chemistry of the team, and he's not easy to play with. Because Jason Tatum, after that great rookie year, looked like he didn't know what he was. Jaylen Brown didn't know what he was, and everybody was wondering, what's wrong with the Boston Celtics? They have too much talent to be struggling this much. And then obviously you saw what happened in the playoffs. They got swept in the semifinals by the Milwaukee Bucks. And it was just rumors all year about how they didn't really like playing together, and just there was a lot of issues. Kyrie throwing teammates under the bus. So obviously Boston this offseason made changes. They let go of Kyrie and brought in Kemba Walker. Kemba Walker has been playing on the Charlotte Hornets for all of his career. Charlotte has never really been a winning team. I think they've made the playoffs twice since he's been there for the last maybe 8 seasons. Kemba is one of the most underrated players in the game. And he's also one of the most clutch players in the game. A lot of people feel like that he has all the potential and talent in the world to be a guy who can be very vital on a championship team. So obviously they brought him in feeling like we're getting a better Kyrie Irving, I guess some people would say, in terms of leadership, playability, how he works with other teammates, all of that. And when you see the season the way it went, it worked. Everybody seemed like they were happy playing together. Everybody meshed well together. And they played at a high level all season long. Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum finally looked like what they looked like during that playoff run when Kyrie was out. And Kemba Walker has still been Kemba Walker. The Boston Celtics are a team that started the season, everybody thought, okay, they'll just be a team that's like in the middle of the Eastern Conference. They'll make it to the playoffs, and they'll probably lose in the second round to a team now, before this hiatus, people were actually predicting could upset Milwaukee and make it to the NBA Finals. And that's one of the reasons why, is because of the emergence of Jason Tatum. From going from a guy who was a star, future star, all-star, to now people think he's hitting superstar ceiling. Because he's out here dropping 30 a night, going against some of the best competition and playing his best ball. And this was also when Kemba was hurt. So if you think about it, with that being known, they've clearly came out and played well. And any nagging or lingering issue Kemba Walker had, clearly with this hiatus, he will be healthy. That's one thing, which I'll talk about probably in a future segment in the future in one of the shows. This break will cause a lot of players who may have had nagging injuries to get healthy. So when the season comes back, no one's going to be hurt. And even the players who were hurt out for the season might be able to come back if their team's in the playoffs. But we'll see. Like I said, that's discussion for another day. But for the Boston Celtics, you got Tatum, you got Kemba. Jaylen Brown's playing very well. You still got Gordon Hayward. A lot of people were very critical of the Gordon Hayward play after last year because was he hindering Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown because they inserted him to the starting lineup. Now it's working because Boston has 4 guys who can all score 20. 4 guys who can have a big night. They're not a team that is like, oh, if one guy doesn't do it, they only have one other guy. They literally, if Kemba has a bad night, Tatum and Gordon and Brown could all have big nights and make up for it. And that's what makes them, from a scoring perspective, a deep team. Because they have 4 guys who can get you 20 any night. Now, obviously, the weakness that a lot of people look like is on this team is their big men. Their big men and bench. They don't really have any elite big men or any what you consider above average big men in a lot of people's mind. But they have a lot of hard workers in the paint. They have a lot of guys who effort, physical, plays hard, guys like that. And off the bench, they got guys like Grant Williams and other guys' name I cannot speak. But, a lot of people wonder, are they going to have enough from those two sides of the spectrum? Obviously, you still have Marcus Smart, and everybody knows what Marcus Smart can do. But, Wanamaker, all those guys. Those are the guys that people aren't sure about. And so, will it put a lot of pressure on the 4 of them to really contribute? A lot of people look at that as like maybe if they had a slightly more skilled big man, this would make them more definitively a favorite. But obviously, you got to think about it. They're paying Kemba the max. They're playing Gordon the max. Tatum's going to probably get the max. Brown's going to get close to the max, if not the max. I mean, they're going to have some decisions they have to make when these contracts come up. I believe this is Tatum's 3rd year, so after next year will be this year they have to decide, are we picking up Tatum's option for a 5th year, which I would think they would, and I'm sure they're going to give him a max. I'm sure Gordon, he won't be there probably by that time, so I'm sure he'll be off the books, so I'm sure getting him the contract, Jason Tatum contract's going to be fine. I think the big question when that time comes around would be more Jaylen Brown, because he's the 3rd guy. He's like the 3rd best player out of like the 3 if we're not considering Gordon Hayward. And obviously, it's like, do you feel like paying Warden a lot of, or is somebody going to give Jason Brown the max to be their guy? Obviously, these are big questions that are looking to be asked because we don't know what they're going to do moving forward. So I think that's obviously a very interesting scenario. I mean, you could say it's a good scenario. It just depends on how Danny Ainge views Jaylen Brown, because I feel like Jason is getting that max. He's the future of their franchise. Kimba, when his contract's up, he'll be in the 30s. They might let him go. I'm sure, you're still trying to figure out, well, we still got Jaylen and we still got Jason, so it might be better for us to make sure we have those two here, and then we'll figure out the rest of the team and build around these two guys. So, we'll have to see what really happens, I'd say, when it comes to that. But Boston, like I said, has all the potential in the world to be an NBA champion. And when the season comes back, this could be good for them. They can see it work on what they can do. Obviously, right now, they're not obviously meeting together because obviously the NBA does not want big groups. So they're probably, as an individual player, they can maybe work on some things, see some things for themselves. Like, what can I do better? Jaylen Brown could still be sitting here, and Jason Tatum could still be sitting here and saying, what can I do to be better? What can I do to be better than I was before? What can I do to be better than I was previously? How can I come back and be at another level when we get back on the court? Because this is usually around the time where players take the offseason to improve their game. And right now, obviously, again, everybody's quarantining right now, but you have certain players, they got gyms in their house, so they're taking advantage of it if they have it, because then obviously that would create them really moving up in the ladder in terms of one of the best teams in the NBA. And I'm sure the Boston Celtics and the Boston Celtics faithful are going to be very excited to see what this team looks like when it gets all said and done at the end of the day. Because like I said, all the potential that they have, I mean, they're going to be a solid team for years to come. They have all the talent in the world to be, and all you can do is just look at it and think, well, they can be better, and they will continue to be better moving forward. But coming up next, we're going to get into the Orlando Magic season in review, where the Magic are right now, how their season has been, what their future looks like, and everything surrounding that, all right here on the podcast.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment, we talked about the Boston Celtics, how their season has been going, how everything has went for them, where they are right now in their season, where they were to start the season. Obviously, we talked about what happened with my Boston last year and why they're in such a better place this year. Obviously, the additions of Kemba Walker and Jason Tatum becoming a superstar has really catapulted them to a level where people think they can make it to the NBA Finals and upset the Milwaukee Bucks. So clearly, there's a lot of hype behind Boston. We'll have to see if the season comes back in the playoffs, how they come out, because you don't know how rusty players are going to be. Not being able to play together for a while. It feels like that's why I feel like they might still have regular season games before the playoffs, just to give players a chance to kind of get back into motion with each other before starting the playoffs. Because starting just the playoffs as soon as you get back, players are like, I haven't even played with each other for a year. Which, I mean, people think that create more upsets for maybe like teams that have lower seeds to get upsets, because all it takes is just whoever plays the best at that moment. So there you go. But now we're going to talk about the Orlando Magic and their season. Orlando is currently also in the playoffs right now. Have a losing record. 8th seed, I believe, right now. I believe they were the AFC before the season ended. Them or Brooklyn. I want to say it was Orlando, though. Obviously, Orlando is a team where last year they finished, I think, around 500, and they upset the Toronto Raptors, the eventual NBA champions, in Game 1, and lost 4 straight. They have a lot of good young pieces. Obviously, they were surrounded around the Markelle Fultz thing because of obviously what happened with him. They traded for him, and he has ended up being a good blessing for them. He's given them a scoring point guard they never had, because I think before then, you had DJ Augustine, but you also have Alfred Payton. Obviously, they were able to let him go and bring in Fultz. You got Nikola Vucevic. One of the more, he's not really talked about, but he's one of the better centers in the league. Can stretch the floor. Can get you about a double-double a game. A guy who, like I said, just never is talked about. I mean, obviously, a lot of players in Orlando is never talked about. Terrence Ross, he's found a little niche in Orlando, coming off the bench, a scorer. In Toronto, we knew Terrence Ross was a dunker. But Orlando, I feel like his game has expanded, and now he's more of a scoring guard who's he's an explosive scorer. I like to call an explosive scorer, a guy who could drop 20 instantly. And he's really improved his game. Obviously, I told you about DJ Augustine, been around for a while. He's been there, solid. Evan Fournier, one of the better shooters that we don't talk about in the league, a guy who can, shoot at a very high clip when he's on. Like I said, different guys. Aaron Gordon, clearly, we know what happened in the dunk contest this past year. Highway robbery, but that's not what we're talking about right now. But obviously, Aaron Gordon's been there for a few years. Really, he's a guy who is one of the most athletic players in the game. Obviously, he's one of the best dunkers we have in this game. And he's also been trying to work on creating a three-point shot for himself. And obviously, a very big disappointment in Mo Bamba so far. Mo Bamba was a guy who came out of college, had all the physical tools to be a dominant center, and so far has not reached those expectations. He seems a little soft in the paint, struggles from the free throw line, struggles to score. He gives you blocks. He's doing that. But outside of that, he's really struggling to give anybody, the Orlando Magic, much of anything else, which is, I think, one of the reasons why they've taken a little bit of a step back this year, because they were expecting Mo Bamba to take a step up, and he hasn't. So with all the talent that he has, and him not giving them a lot of production, is very disappointing, I'm sure, from the Orlando Magic brass. So, I mean, Orlando is what I like to say, and I had this. I believe I had this about a month ago. I talked about it's one of the worst places you want to be in the league. Is I feel like you either want to be bad or you want to be great. You want to be a championship contender, or you want to be tanking. You don't want to be in that middle mediocrity. You're good enough to make the playoffs, but you're not good enough to do anything every year type of situation, because it just feels like you make changes to the team, but but none of the changes are too big of a change to really create that momentum forward. And I feel like that's where Orlando is right now. They're at a spot where they really what player on the team is really a star player? I mean, you say Vucevic, but not a lot of people, they look at him as a very good player. I don't think people look at him as a star. Orlando's one of the teams you may look at and say they don't have a star player. And it shows, in their record. It shows in how they play. They're in that position ever since, I believe, Dwight Howard. They haven't really had a star there. And obviously, like I said, you don't want to tank on purpose, but at the same time, you want to win games, make the playoffs. Like I said, kind of reminds me of the Hawks from years ago, where with Mike Woodson especially, they had guys, they were going to make the playoffs every year, but that was about it. They really weren't going to make that push because they didn't have that guy to get them over the top. And I feel like that's what's going on in Orlando right now. They're kind of just stuck in mediocrity. So we don't know what's going to happen. Because usually with these types of situations, you usually have to implode the situation to then potentially move up. You never really hear of many players or big-time players wanting to go to Orlando. So obviously that's another issue. I mean, they've thought about trading guys like Vucevic. They've thought about trading guys like Aaron Gordon. They've thought about trading guys like Mo Bamba. So clearly, it's on their mind that they got to make changes. They gotta adjust things. They can't approach their seasons the same because it's not going to get anywhere. And with this break, this isn't necessarily going to help or hurt them. I think they're going to be the same Orlando Magic. I mean, right now, if they are the 8th seed, they play Milwaukee. You would expect that to be a sweep. If not, maybe getting a game. But most people would say sweep. And even if they didn't, they play Toronto. Toronto's Toronto. They might be able to get a game from them. But you would still say 5 games are a sweep. And I think when you get to that point as a franchise, you're just in this place of mediocrity. It just feels like, well, what can we do to really upgrade our team and really put us in a position to be able to compete eventually with some of the better teams in the NBA? And that's a question that Orlando has to answer for themselves. That's a question, what's going to happen, And it's just one of the things that we have to see what happens at the end of the day. I really, truly believe you got to see what happens at the end of the day. I'm sure that Orlando is going to try to figure out what's the best move for them to make. They may have to trade away pieces like Aaron Gordon, Vucevic, Terrence Ross. You can build around Markelle, folks. He's young. He has talent. You can build around a guy like that. If Mo Bamba can get better, you can build around Mo Bamba. But if Mo Bamba continues to struggle, you're going to have to get rid of Mo Bamba. So you can. Orlando has a lot of players that I think teams that are trying to make playoffs would want because they would make a good addition. I feel like they have a lot of. I feel like Orlando's one of those teams. They have a lot of pieces, but they don't have They don't have any stars. They have pieces though. They have guys. You bring them onto a team, they'll be effective if they're in a certain setting. But all of them together, they have a very low ceiling. And so, if that's the case, that's kind of where you're at. That's kind of where you stand, and that's kind of where it's going to be. So obviously, it's a very, again, difficult situation for Orlando moving forward. I'm sure this offseason, these are things they will think about moving forward. They know where their team is. I feel like teams like this, you have this break. As a team, if you reflect, we know what we are. You kind of honestly, bro, probably we just want the season to be over with because we're not going to do anything. We're basically coming back just to play a couple regular season games and get swept in the first round and then be over with. It's almost like we know what we are. There's really no point to try to keep trying to go through with it. We're not fighting for anything. We're just here. So I feel like obviously that's where Orlando Magic basketball has not been popular in Orlando in so many years because they just haven't had one of those teams or days where they can really break out and be an exciting bunch. So we'll have to see what they decide to do, and that was your Orlando Magic season in review. Coming up next, we're going to go to the Washington Wizards. We're going to talk about the Washington Wizards, their season in review, and what their season and future may look like moving forward. All that right here on the podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment, we broke down the Orlando Magic season. We broke down how their season has looked, where they are as a franchise right now. I talked about how they're in that that place you don't want to be in the league, where you're in the middle and you're just not where you are. If the Eastern Conference was better, they would be good enough to be a lottery team, but at the same time, it's not. So they're good enough to make the playoffs, but not do anything in the playoffs. So that's kind of where that's kind of where they are. It's kind of where they stay. I think that's what creates such an issue for them, long term, is that they don't really know where they're going next with their seasons moving forward, and they're going to have to hope for the best. So, I broke all that down more with the Orlando Magic last segment, but now we're going to talk about the Washington Wizards. The Wizards are a team that a lot of people expected coming into this year not to be good. Obviously, John Wall missing this year with his Achilles. He missed the end of last year, and he missed the beginning of this year with the Achilles injury. Now, he's a guy that some people may wonder, could he be back? Highly doubt it. I highly doubt they'll put him out there. I'm sure they'll just wait till the new season comes around to put John Wall out there on the floor. Bradley Beal, during that time, has become one of the best players in the game, averaging 25 a game, almost 30 a game, carrying his team, dropping 40, 50-point games, and losing. Obviously, for a player, if you're putting those type of performances up and losing, it's frustrating. It's very frustrating. Obviously, we know, looking at the situation, Bradley Beal needs John Wall back. Wizards are a team that, with the way they play, if they can get John Wall back, you would expect them to be in the race next year. If John Wall can get back to being John Wall, and if Bradley Beal can keep being Bradley Beal, you would expect them to be back in the race. They were considered one of the best backcourts in the NBA. They got some young guys. They have guys, David Bertans. He's a guy who's on them. He has become a sharpshooter for them. He's a shooter who could score, but the best of them. They drafted their number one pick this year out of Japan. I don't know how, I think it's Ri is his first name. I don't know how to say his last name. But he is a guy who athletic and rebound. They got some guys. They brought in Isaiah Thomas this year. Ish Smith. They got some talent, but they have some young pieces they can work with John Wall and Bradley Beal. Obviously, some people were wondering if they would try to get out of the John Wall contract because of his injuries, and maybe because the Washington team, we think, may have hit their ceiling. And usually when you feel like with two players you've hit your ceiling, sometimes as a front office you feel like you might need to move off one. And now with him being out and having a very untradeable contract, it's like, well, we might have to just keep him through it. The Wizards are in the playoff race, but they are about 4 or 5 games out with about 10 to 15 games left. So they have a very small opportunity. They would need one of either Brooklyn or Orlando to have a bad stretch, and they would have to have a good stretch to really jump into the playoffs. That's why if I say in the Eastern Conference, it feels like the spots are determined, but if the Washington Wizards can maybe get on a streak and then one of the top lower 2 seeds don't, that would be their way in. So obviously that would create, the situation where they'd be put in a better place. And if they were able to make the playoffs with just Bradley Beal, obviously that's probably going to give them confidence, thinking, well, we made the playoffs with Bradley Beal as our only star player. If John comes back, I mean, we should be in the playoffs for sure next year. And now we can go back to maybe trying to get to the Eastern Conference semifinals, potentially Eastern Conference finals, depending on how this team is built. Obviously, Scott Brooks, the head coach of the Wizards, coming there after he left Oklahoma City, working with what he's had. The Wizards are just a team that, they play in a nation's capital. They play where the president lives. They've always been a kind of a unique franchise. And, like I said, they have decisions they have to make. They've for the longest time, they've tried to find a third guy to Bradley Beal and John Wall. First, they thought it was Otto Porter. And then Otto Porter, he was fine, but he seemed like more of a role player, just a good 3-and-D guy. And then they tried Kelly Oubre, and that experiment failed in 2 years. Now he's with the Phoenix Suns. I think Otto Porter with the Phoenix Suns, too. Or he was. He's up with the Chicago Bears now. Not the Chicago Bears, Chicago Bulls now. So the Wizards have, because they've been looking for that third guy. Because remember the playoff teams with the Washington Wizards first. They had very good starting lineups with John Wall, Bradley Beal, Nene, Gortat, and either Paul Pierce or Trevor Ariza. Those were their best years. Obviously, the issues with those teams at those times was Washington's bench wasn't the best, and so the starters had to do a lot to produce. Obviously, the league has changed, and you can't be playing Nene and Bajin Gortat like you used to. So they're having to get more athletic guys, which is why they drafted the guy they drafted, and they got Bertans, who's a bigger guy and can shoot, stretch the floor and hit the three. But I'm sure they're going to still look for a third guy who can score, because they're looking for a guy who can sit here and shoot the ball with the best of them, like I said. And obviously, you want a guy who can shoot. And I think if you have that, that's going to work. And then you need a guy who can score effortlessly. So they just need a good guy. I could see a Rudy Gay coming in here. He'd be a good addition, potentially. I could see them breaking in. Really, they don't need a guy who's a star in any means, but you just need a guy who's a solid guy who can come in there and get you your points. Preferably probably off the bench, unless they want to do what they've been doing and try to put more into their starting lineup. Obviously, the key to their success for next season, too, is John Wall coming back. How is John Wall going to look after his Achilles? Remember, John Wall was considered at one point in this time one of the fastest players in the NBA. With that Achilles and him also being at 30, about 30, we don't know what John Wall is going to look like. We don't know how fast. He's still going to be quick, but he's not going to be John Wall what we knew. Is John Wall still going to be the explosive John Wall? Is he still going to be explosive? Is he still going to jump out the gym? Is he still going to block shots? How is his jump shot improved? That was the biggest knock on John Wall. He could never hit the jump shot consistently to make you contest it. I'm sure, I said this a few weeks ago too. I feel like sometimes when you're injured, this can ultimately be one of the best blessings. Because one thing about when you're rehabbing, you're working on your game while you're rehabbing. Because you're working on your game to rehab, but also to work on your game. Obviously, I would think if John Wall is an Achilles, it's more about explosiveness and everything. You can work on your jump shot a lot, make sure he responds well. And while also doing that, you can improve your jump shot. Like I said, we have to see how he does in real game time, but that seems like there's a lot of improvement there with John Wall. John Wall at the time when he came out was one of my favorite players. You know, he hit the Dougie in his first game. I mean, you knew that man was going to be a legend because of that. But, you know, obviously his career may have not been as what people thought he could have been, but he was considered one of the better point guards in the game. He was considered a top 5 point guard in this game. And like I said, we'll have to see what the Wizards decide to do to try to get this team going. Because like I said, they have some young pieces. You got Bradley Beal balling. It's just one of those things. You have to really end up mushing and meshing the team together to create, you know, the situation for them to be able to win. And I think that's the biggest thing that we were trying to figure out with the Washington Wizards. The Wizards have potential again to be a playoff team for sure next year. They have a potential to still make the playoffs this year. They're going to get one of the best players back, depending on how he plays. You know, this is a team that, like I said, with John Wall and Bradley Beal in those years, kind of felt like they were getting to a point where they were mushed in mediocrity. They were mushed in, you're just at this place of, it's just the max. Is making it to the Eastern Conference Finals every year our max? Is this really the best we can do? Do we need to make any changes? Do we need to make an adjustment? These are the questions that the Washington front office will have to make. And I'm sure after this hiatus, again, let's just say they don't make the playoffs as expected. They'll go into the offseason trying to figure out, well, what would be our best move to make moving forward, and trying to get this franchise to a winning standpoint and a winning point again, where we can start competing against some of the better teams in the Eastern Conference and potentially compete for a championship. But coming up next, last team we're going to talk about, the Charlotte Hornets. We're going to break down Michael Jordan's team and how their season has been as we give them a season in review right here on the podcast.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment, we're going to watch the Wizards season. In depth breakdown of what their future looked like, how their season has been. It hasn't been the greatest season in the world, but I know that they feel like they have some expectations and some hope with John Wall returning next season. I don't think he'll return even if they start the season back. If they start the season in August, I mean, you could say, yeah, but then do you really want to bring them out if they're not going to make the playoffs? I feel like if they make the playoffs, they might try to bring John back, but if not, I highly doubt he'll be stepping foot on the team's court till the next full season starts. And just, basically, they have some things going for them. Bradley Beal's been having to carry the load, but they have some things going for them, and the Wizards have potential to be a playoff team the next full season with John Wall coming back, and if they make a couple adjustments to the team. But now we're going to get into the final team of this episode, the Charlotte Hornets. As you know, Michael Jordan owns this team. He is the GM of this team. He has tried to make a lot of deals, draft a lot of players, sign a lot of guys, and it feels like every single one of them never work out. It feels like Charlotte is either a borderline lottery team or an 8th seed. More times lottery. They had their one guy he hit on was Kemba Walker, and he let him walk. Ever since then, they've missed on a lot of guys like Michael Kidd-Gilchrist. They signed guys like Nick Batum from Portland. Didn't work out. He picked up guys like Cody Zeller, and them not working. And it's just there's a lot of misses. But with the new Charlotte Hornets team now, there is something that they have momentum. Devontae Graham, point guard from Kansas, last year didn't really play that much. This year, now has become a solidified top 6 man in this game and can score. He kind of came onto the scene this year. Obviously, if you know what happened this past offseason, the Hornets went and signed Terry Rozier. But we can sit here and say he's not even the best point guard on his roster. It's Devontae Graham. He has had an excellent year this year. He has came out and made tons of improvement, which is why he is now one of the best players in the game. That's why he's in the running for most improved player of the year, if they still give that award out. But he's in the running for it because of the improvement he made from year 1 to year 2. They also have a guy like P.J. Washington. He's been a beast on the boards. Athletic, can dunk. I mean, he's a guy they drafted from Kentucky. He's played at a high level. He's played at a level where you can't sit here and tell me he's not good. They have some young guys. And that's what's really helping them out right now. It's kind of giving you as a fan hope. With him, Devontae Graham, we can't forget about Miles Bridges. Miles Bridges has also been a young guy that's played well. We don't know if any of these guys are going to be stars, but they're very good young players. Charlotte was also competing for a playoff spot, even though they were a little bit farther out. They still got a guy like Malik Monk on the team. They have some guys. It's not the greatest team ever built. Obviously, you usually see that with most Charlotte teams, but they have pieces. They just have to find the right combination of veterans and young players and a good coach So really get them to a point where maybe they can start making the playoffs consistently. You know, they've been banging on Jordan for not being a good GM, making a lot of bad draft decisions, making a lot of bad signing decisions, how a lot of his draft picks have missed, and now he's starting to hit on a few of them, getting good players, them meshing together, becoming better as a team. And really, the Hornets, see, the thing is, Charlotte has never been a team that has been looked at as a very winning basketball tradition. They've always been looked at as that mediocre team or the team who was always a lottery pick. Some of their best years came at the end of their Bobcat years, I would say, with Al Jefferson, and I believe it was Al Jefferson. I think Steven Jackson was on that team. They had a lot. This is still 2010, late 2000s, I would say, early 2000s, 2010s. This is when they were at kind of the better part of their team, but really ever since then, it's been hard. Obviously, like I said, they hit on Kemba Walker, but Kemba Walker is not a player who's going to change your franchise, but he's a very good piece of your franchise. It seems like Jordan can get pieces, but he can't get a star, and that's what's really been hindering him and why people view him as a bad GM and some of the financial decisions he's made. Remember, without Michael Jordan, certain things didn't happen. If he never went out of his way to go get Nichols Batum, we would have never got CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard. Because before, people forget this, it was Damian Lillard and Nicholas Batum when he first started his career, Damian Lillard. And then he got a better player that we feel like is better than Nicholas Batum and CJ McCollum. You know, and obviously, like I said, they've had guys, Emil Okafor, all those guys. Charlotte is a team, I think, for the first time in a few years, even with Kemba being gone, they have some excitement. They have something you can look forward to, like I said, with the three young players, Miles Bridges, PJ Washington, and Devontae Graham. Now, I don't know. I feel like this is a situation which I think Terry Rozier probably won't finish his contract out there. I just feel like he won't. He's kind of where Reggie Jackson was after he left Oklahoma City. He can play for you, he can start for you, but he's never going to be an impact player. He'll probably be a very good role player of that. And they, like I said, they have a lot of potential to really move up and really gear up for what they want to do into the future. They have all the potential in the world to be a very good team if they can get the right pieces around them. If you make a couple of changes to this roster, maybe you can bring in a slightly higher rated player, maybe a very good veteran. Why not? Charlotte is 10th in the East. Not 2 spots, but they're 2 positions below the 8th seed. So they have all the potential in the world to, if they get better even next year and they make good changes to the team, they can easily compete for a playoff spot in the Eastern Conference. The thing is, it's just, this is where Michael Jordan has to really show development. They say Jordan's been trying so hard to try to find that next Jordan. Because, when you're the greatest player in the game, you want to find someone who reminds you of yourself. But not everybody who reminds you of yourself is you. They may still be a bust. Obviously we know one of his worst decisions he drafted was Michael Kidd-Gilchrist with the messed up jump shot. That's the reputation he's fighting. And for him to fully break through and for people to say, oh, Jordan's a good GM, he has to take the talent he has and really develop it and get it somewhere. Now, I don't think unless they get a superstar, they're going to be a championship team. But I think just maybe I think Charlotte, even though you don't want to be in that mediocre part, I think Charlotte right now wants to be in a part where they can make the playoffs for a few years in a row and play consistent basketball. Just so they can have something to look forward to up there. Because remember, outside of the Carolina Panthers, ain't that much there in terms of big sports franchises. So, giving the Hornets something that they want to do, I think it's going to be very, very important that they sit here and make sure they make the right decisions moving forward good personnel decisions, continued development of their young players, bringing good veterans that can help these young players and also help the team, stay with the good coaching, and Charlotte could be a team that's consistently in the playoffs. And then maybe potentially they can get a star. If they can pull off something, they might be able to take a big step moving forward into the future. Remember, they'll probably be a lottery team again this year. You always hope that one of these guys are going to end up being that next big star. But you also can find you guys who can play well for you, and the Hornets have all the potential in the world to be a good team for years to come with some of the gems they have found. But that's going to be it here on the GSMC Basketball Podcast. I was your host, Brice Lewis. Glad you came and listened to us another day. We're going to be back at it again next week with more basketball updates. I'm going to give more teams the season in reviews. That's how we're going to do it during this coronavirus. But I'm going to give you more seasons of reviews. Appreciate you tuning in. Don't forget to follow us on social media. Thank you, and have a good day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.